It's Anna from Post Me a Book. I'm going to talk about two books, and both of these books are because of book banning, more or less, not completely. But my thing is, I actually didn't know there was a thing such as book banning, and I came across it quite by accident, really, because as you know, this has been several years back that it started. So I'm a bit late off the bat, but that's nothing new. And I discovered this by chance because I had decided to reread Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. This is a children's book, and I think it was on my reading list long time ago, perhaps when I was 10 or something like that. And to this day, I was so sure I'd read this book, but I couldn't really remember it. So I decided to reread it. Now, it puts some things in context. When I was a child, about 10, and my family, we were living in the UK, we had moved to the UK, we as a family had watched things like the Holocaust and Roots as a series, both of which were series, so we watched them every week as a family. So certain things were in my mind working away, and Roll of Thunder, which I believe was on my school list, looking at the cover of the book then, which was a young black girl, and the picture of a fire burning in the background was the cover of the book. And because I'd watched Roots, I sort of had an idea what this book was going to be about. And I thought, well, I'm going to read it. So I think I definitely started the book back in the day, but now I'm not so sure. Now, I tried to borrow this book because at this point, I really don't want to buy books as such, because there's so many books in this house that I haven't read, and I feel I should perhaps read these books first instead of buying more books. And so I decided, well, let me try and borrow it from a library. But that didn't work because, again, as I pointed out several times, Swedish library, fewer English books. And so that was the case. But I did manage to actually borrow an audio borrow the audio from Libby Jen, I think it was. So that was good. And on listening to this book, I realized I hadn't read it. I have just been kidding myself. Again, so many things. I have just been kidding myself that I'd read this book. I had not. I might have began it, but there's so much that I cannot remember that I am almost 100% sure that I never read this book. And yeah, so it's a good thing I decided to reread it because it was a good book. I think the audio book was really very good. The person who read the book, she was excellent. The book is about the Logan family, who are black people living in a black community in America in the 1930s. And the main character of the book is Cassie, who's an 11-year-old girl. And also it shows the interactions with the family. Cassie, our brothers, Stacy, who's 13 years old, and little man, who's the youngest brother. The Logan family, as I said, live in a black community, and Stacy and her brothers, they're loved and protected and feel safe. And I guess it's about the family trying to keep their children safe from the harsh realities of what life really is for a black person living during these times. And to some extent, certainly in the beginning, they succeed in doing this. Stacy, as we find out, already knows how things really are, that white people try and bring down black people and try and make black people feel less than people. That's to say, a superiority over black people. And it turns out that for Cassie, she hasn't actually realized that this is the way it is or she gets to realize, or she gets an indication of how things really are without actually understanding this, when she makes a trip at some point with her grandmother and Stacy and Stacy's best friend at the time, who's called TJ, who's 14 years old. They make a trip to a nearby town called Strawberry so that the grandmother can sell vegetables. And when they get to Strawberry, it's a market day. And when they get to Strawberry Town, the grandmother parks way back, and Casey wonders Why? She keeps telling her grandmother, take the wagon closer. That way more people will see that you're here, and that way you'll sell more things. But her grandmother says, no, it's okay where we are. I have regulars who'll come and buy my wares. So then they're parked way back. And Casey, sorry, keep mixing Stacy. Casey is none the wiser for why this is the case. And then another incident that happens is when Casey, on the same day, when Casey, Stacy, and TJ go into a shop to buy something that TJ was sent to buy by his father. And the shopkeeper, who's white, starts serving them. But in the middle of serving them, he stops to go and start serving a white woman who had called out to him. And they're left standing there. And Casey starts getting impatient after a while, and she thinks, he's forgotten us. Perhaps I'll go over and remind him. And you're thinking as a reader, no, don't do that. This will not turn out well. But Casey, being a strong-headed and a stubborn girl, and she feels this is wrong, he started serving them. She goes to the shopkeeper and says, Mr. So-and-so, perhaps I think you've forgotten that you started serving us. And of course, all the white people look at her and are shocked. And the shopkeeper starts thinking and saying to her, whose child is this? You're thinking, this is not going to end well. But fortunately for Casey, her grandmother comes into the shop just at the right time. Her grandmother is very apologetic, very subservient, starts backing off, saying, forgive her, she does not know what she's done, kind of thing. And so that incident passes over okay. There's another incident that happens before they actually get home on the wagon to travel home, that her grandmother again also apologizes to another white family because of something that Casey had or had not done. And Casey's so mad and she's so irritated because she hasn't got a clue why this is happening. She can't quite understand why her grandmother forces her to say sorry when she's not even in the wrong. So she's so determined to tell her mother about this when she gets back. So what we get to see here is that the mother and the father, they're so protective of their children. They just want them to grow up as natural kids and with a sense of identity. By growing up in a secure, loving family, at least you get a strong sense of identity. And there's no doubt that at this point, Casey has a very strong sense of identity. There are other incidents that also happen in the book that depict the realities of 1930s. There are also incidents with also the father and the mother and others in the community. There's Mildred Taylor, the author. She takes up lynchings that happens. She takes up burnings that happens. She takes up how the family, the Logan family, how they persevere in the struggle of everything. They persevere. They try and better not just themselves but also the community. The book shows how the black people, the black community, they're kept down, not just because it's a time of poverty, but because white people keep them down. When they try and rise up, they're always beaten down by something. They don't own their lands, the majority of them, so they haven't really got anything to bargain with. The Logan family own their land. And although they do have something to bargain with, they have to continuously struggle to keep their land because there's a white man has always tried to get a hold of their land. And up to this point, he hasn't quite succeeded. But he certainly makes every single effort to try and gain their land. And if he's not getting it, then he's going to do his best to bring them down. And he succeeds at some point because it was just this white man who's called Mr. I forget what he's called. But he manages to make Casey's mother, who had been a teacher at the local black school, the local black school, he gets her sacked because of something she had done, which he could say, well, you're destroying school property, and because of that, you'll be sacked. And she was, which then meant that Casey's family now had one less breadwinner, which makes it that much tougher for them. The book doesn't just focus on Casey's family. It also takes up TJ, who's as I said, at some point he was Stacey's best friend, and he was 14, but he did something, so he fell out of favor with Stacey, who then said, no, you're no friend of mine. And Casey had never liked TJ, ever, so she was quite willing to drop him like a hot potato, and she did. But Stacey, you feel sorry for not Stacey, you feel sorry for TJ, because it's sort of, you get the feeling that although he's portrayed as a young person who doesn't always do the right things, you sort of feel that he's kind of lost his way, and if someone was there to help him, perhaps he would have been all right. But he continuously does the wrong things, and then he ends up on the wrong path, and it doesn't end well. And there is a very sad moment in the book where, because of something that happened to TJ, it doesn't end well. I won't say that much about it, because who knows, you might read a book even if it's a children's book. And just to quickly summarize, it is about the Logan family, a black family living in the US in the 1930s. It's their struggles and the struggles of the community in trying to just get through life, where everything is constant struggle. It's not just a struggle of poverty, it's the continuous subjugation of black people by white people, trying to keep your children safe and protected so that they grow up with a strong identity of themselves even before they get to understand this is the reality of the world. Mildred Taylor, the author, she does also take up in the book that there were white people who did try to help the community and who oppose the way things are. She also takes up lynching, burning, and other things that happened to black people because they were black. So why was this book banned, or why was it on the list of banned books? As I've understood it, it is because it takes up things like lynching and burning, and that certain parents anyway, seem to thought that this, if their kids read about this, it could actually affect the child. And yeah, this could of course be the case. I have to say, as a child, when I chose to read this book, or not as the case may be, I had no real problems. Well, had no real problems. That's probably not quite true, because as I said, I'd watched Holocaust, I'd watched The Root, so I'd sort of had an idea what I was getting myself into. But as I said, as it turned out, I didn't read this book. So I don't know. I don't think it would have affected me like that. But again, I had a strong enough of an identity to not think that this is something that I'm going to worry about at night. And I guess, as Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie had said in an interview, book banning, in all respects, certain things are not suitable for a certain group of kids. So you have to put these books out with reference to the age group and to just how mature the kids are. I don't think this book should have been banned, but again, perhaps it's not something that necessarily has to be on a school list, or that's to say, be on the school list, but a choice that children can decide whether to read it or not. I think if I'd read it then, I wouldn't have actually appreciated everything that I appreciate now, because listening to this book, I see and I hear so well the things that went on. She really depicts, Mildred Taylor, she really depicts and tells a story in such a way that you feel it coming to life. So I think it's good that I listen to it now, because there are a lot of things that I think I'd have read but missed, just because I perhaps wasn't at a mature enough. But I don't think this one needs to be banned at all. These things happened, and I think trying to hide it from kids is not good either. There's no reason to do this. It's not a book where there's this kind of violence where it's continuous and all the time, and you start thinking, no, this is going to disturb my kids' dreams. I don't think it's that kind of book. In conclusion, anyway, what I can say is this book ended in a way which I wasn't expecting either. So again, I know I didn't read this book because this ending was not what I thought it was. I had already assumed what the I'd already assumed what the ending was, because I looked at the cover, I read I read the title, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and I reached my own conclusions. They were wrong. So, in conclusion, a book well worth reading. And I also found out that Mildred Taylor, she has actually written sequels to this book. So kid book or not, I think I will read those books just because I'm interested to know the follow-up. Sounds quite exciting. So that was my first book. I will give you the next book in just a few minutes. Oh, Mice and Men is a novella by George Steinbeck. John Steinbeck, written in 1937 and based during that time. And it's about two men, George and Lennie, two white men, George and Lennie, who are farm workers, and they're fleeing their last farm and going to look for work on another farm. And they're fleeing because Lennie, who's a big guy, has been accused of attempted rape. This wasn't actually the case, but the way things are, Lennie would not have managed to get himself out of this. George is a smart, uneducated guy, and Lennie is a strong big guy and intellectually disabled. But they've gone together, they've been together for a long time, and George looks out for Lennie because Lennie, as he is, will not have managed to have made it in society on his own. So George has taken him under his wing, so to speak. So the beginning of the book, these two guys are sitting by a river, and George is telling Lennie about their dreams. They have a dream they share, which is about when they've worked and they've earned enough money, they will buy themselves a piece of land, a house, and live there. And Lennie will be able to keep rabbits, because Lennie is very fond of animals, but because of his strength, every time he's given an animal, because he had pet mice, he pets them too hard, so he's constantly killing them, but he doesn't actually realize this is the reason why. But to continue, these two are on their way to the farm, but before they get there, George says to Lennie, if anything bad happens to you, come and hide yourself in this bush and wait for me. So then they continue to the farm, and when they get there, George manages to get them some work by talking smoothly with the boss, although the boss is a bit suspicious of Lennie's intellectual capacity, or abilities, I should probably say. But George manages to gets them some work. So then the story goes on. On the farmyard, the boss has a son who's called Curly. Now, Curly has an inferiority complex, and he wants to test Lennie now and again, just because he feels that if he can knock down Lennie, well, and if he can't knock down Lennie, he'll use some way, because he's the boss's son, to bring him down. And at some point, Curly does try to knock down Lennie, but it doesn't end well for Curly. And fortunately for Lennie, Slim, who's another worker, who's a farm worker, who's already been on the farm for a long time, manages to patch things over and threaten Curly by saying, if you try and threaten Lennie, then I'll tell people what really happened. So then that's all kind of smoothed over like that. Curly now has a wife, a very pretty wife supposedly, who goes around flirting with farm workers. So George tells Lennie, avoid this woman because she's trouble, and if she comes around, she can make things tough for you. And Lennie, he does his best to avoid Curly's wife. But at some point, when he's back on the farm and all the other farm hands have gone to the bar, I think it was, Lennie's wife comes around. And we discover that Curly's wife comes around, and we discover that she's actually quite lonely. She's disappointed with her life because she had planned to be an actress and things didn't turn out at all like that. And so on this fateful night, she is talking to Lennie about this, about how she had dreams of being dashed, how she's lonely, how she doesn't really love Curly, and that she doesn't think that much of Curly. But Lennie, at some point, he tries to avoid her at the best of, to the best, but it doesn't quite work out either. And this night, it becomes fateful just because things turn in such a way that for Lennie, it ended up badly. The book is sad. It has a very sad ending. Actually, it's a very short book, so I did manage to read this book very quickly. I actually read this book because it was on the ban list. Otherwise, I don't think I've ever really thought about it. It's been on our shelves again for, I don't know, the longest of times. This is not my book. Could be my husband's, but it's been there for the longest of times and I've just passed it over. But because of this book ban and because it was on the list of banned books, I decided, okay, let me read this. And I think the reason why this book was banned was because it does say the N-word, but more than that, no, I don't think this book should be banned either. Oh yeah, there are trigger warnings of there's some violence, but I don't think that's why it was banned. But as I said, the ending was sad. But at the end of it, this book, I'm not sure whether I liked it. I think I read it and finished it just because it was a short book and I wanted to actually find out why it was on the list. But I can't say whether I would recommend it or not. I can't quite think what the author was trying to bring across. I mean, there's a story, and there is the sad things that are depicted now and then. I don't know whether if it was a longer book, it would have developed in a different way so that I would have felt there's more to this book than just reading a story. But at the end of it, I don't feel I really got anything away from the book. I did feel sad at the end of the book, and I do appreciate the fact that what the author is trying to bring out is the friendship between the two men, that one is very, very protective of the other, and how he tries to really help the other guy, help Lennie, and build a dream so that both of them can share. George doesn't leave Lennie alone at any point, even though I'm sure he could have just dumped him and gone his own way. He never does that. So in that sense, there is that story of a deep friendship and how far George went to maintain this, or how far he went to keep the friendship going, or not. I say or not just because of the ending, but that point is there. So if that was his point, then he made it. Otherwise, as I said, I don't know if I would recommend it. I haven't decided whether I like it or not. Yeah. But thank you very much for listening. That was it. That is the book ban books for me for now. And until next time, bye-bye.